Hey, hi, how you doing? And welcome, another reading wrap-up. This one is many months in the making. It is my April and May reading wrap-up. I read a total of 12 books, I think it was, within those 2 months, and I just want to talk about them a little. Also, you may have seen I accidentally uploaded a short as a video. I don't know what to tell you. I thought I could upload a short that's as long as that. Didn't know that, so I'm debating what to do with it. Whether I should delete it and edit it so that I can upload like that, or if I should just leave it as is. I don't know. So let's start with April. The first book that I read in April was the Empusium by Olga Tokarczuk, and that I gave a 3-star rating, and it was a library audiobook, and I finished that on April 1st. A good subject line would say the deeply misogynistic health resort men's club. This was a very interesting read that dealt with sickness, madness, and misogyny with a different in its current age. It does hold up to a degree because some men are in a way falling to the trap of misogyny and being per se lonely, but I think it was an interesting read with good writing, but I do feel it fell short due to the translation. I feel like if the translation would have been done by a different person, maybe it could have been slightly better. But Where the Past Begins by Amy Lea gave a 4.75 star. It was a physical book, and I finished it on April 3rd, 2025. This was a memoir, and this one was such a good read. It's honestly one of my favorites that I had this year, and it was so great. Yes, I do know that lots of people state that chapter 2, the chapter that deals with music, is very, very boring per se, or not as in your face, but I genuinely think that she has such incredible insight and an incredible life, and she's so well written, and I can't wait to read more books by her. Can't believe that her life is as interesting as it is, and how hard her parents and how interesting her parents' life was. Very good book. The next book that I finished was Set on You by Amy Lea, which is funny too, Amy's back-to-back, was a 3.25 star. It was a library audiobook, and I finished that April 8th. I would say it was a very fun read. It was an interesting take on a fitness influencer and like a normal person having a relationship. I haven't read a book like this before, so I thought it was a fun light read in between some of my serious books that I had wrapped it in between. The next book that I finished was Crazy Rich Asians. I gave that a 4.75 star, and it was by Kwan. I finished it April 9th, 2025, and it was a physical book. This one was on my 25 of 2025, same with Where the Past Begins. This was an incredible read. It was such a fun ride. It's basically Gossip Girl, but with actual adults, and I was very much strapped in for the ride. I really enjoyed all the different POVs and how the story goes and how everyone interacted with each other, and I can't wait to read the next book. The Witches by Stacy Schiff. This was a non-fiction book, and it was a physical book that I read on my 25 of 2025. I finished reading it April 15th, 2025, and I get a 3.25 stars. My review for this was a very interesting read that read more like a scholarly article. It was very interesting. I love Salem, and I find it very interesting to see how Salem is seen through both non-fiction and fiction media, and so I loved it. I will tell you that this is a very big example of mass hysteria coming within a big group of people, and Cotton Mather being the biggest gaslighter of all time. If you like nonfiction, if you like things that read more like scholarly journal, this would be a fun read for you. The next book that I finished was One Star Romance by Laura Hankin. That was a library audiobook that I finished April 17th, 2025, and that was a 4-star book for me. This honestly was an entertaining read where you leave with the main message of don't just settle for anything. You know, sometimes this world, we kind of get the message of like, you're not going to find the perfect person all the time. But I think this book does a really good job of saying, you know, don't just settle. Natalie, our main character, being a very unlikable character at the beginning, who has an insane level of obsession with her best friend that doesn't take well to her getting married, but it's a very interesting read nonetheless. We follow Natalie, Gabby, Robbie, and Angus. Each character has so much to offer. You're dealing with them growing up, coming of age in the sense, growing growing up from young adult to adult to getting a career, and I actually genuinely really enjoy this. It has very silly rom-com energy and some serious moments at times. The Manicurists Daughter by Susan Lieu, and this was a library audiobook, and I finished this April 22nd, and I gave this 4.75 stars, and this as well was a nonfiction memoir. I think this was a very beautifully done book that reminded me of some of the struggles that growing up as a child of immigrants you deal with, but also how you can have so much fear when it comes to medical procedures and what could happen to you, especially as a woman of color. I love this story. It felt very familiar, and how her sensitivity of being ignored caused her to then become a prime victim of a cult, which was insane because all she ever wanted was love. And it's beautiful to see how she changes her outlook on her traumatic moments and how she chooses to finally break the cycle. Also, I do need a update from her ASAP because I want to know that she's okay because of those health problems she stated at the beginning. The Alienist by Carr. That was a physical book, and I gave that 3 stars. I finished it April 28th. This was an interesting and well-written book, but I won't lie, it did feel about 200 pages too long. Even 100 pages were too much, like where nothing happened, and then another 100 pages where I feel like it was unnecessary. It's a very dark read, and it deals with very intense subjects, so do keep that in mind. This is actually one of the most darkest reads with not enough of a payoff for the darkness, I think. This is kind of like a whodunit serial killer kind of book where you're trying to find the serial killer, and it's a very early version of it because it's a very old read. It's very interesting, and I did enjoy chunks of Carr's writing, and I'm glad I finally did get to this book, but I will state that I would not recommend this for the average person. The last book that I read for April was In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune. This was a physical book on my 25 of 2025, and I finished this on April 30th. I gave this a 4.75 star. This was a phenomenal read. T.J. Klune has done it again. It was so beautiful, and it basically talks about the last boy on Earth with a band of silly robots. It gives you a good laugh at times, but honestly, who would have thought that cozy met dystopian loosely? Because that's what this book is. Lets you see this world in such a multi-layered part of the people around you and how each person has more to them than their good or even their bad. It was such a great read. I very much enjoyed it. Let's hit May. So for May, I read 3 books compared to April I read 9. The first book that I read in May was To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This was a physical book off of my 25 of 2025. I gave this 2 stars, and I finished it May 6th. This book put me in such a reading slump. This and another classic. In short, our main characters talk about going to a lighthouse, then you don't go, then you do all go. While you feel existential dread, not too much actually happens, but the good that we can't take from this is when we speak on women, and even though the men around her say to her she can't paint, she might feel a version of imposter syndrome, but then she paints and realizes she will live on through her art and her kids. I may not have enjoyed this book, but I can see all the good it does, all the inspiration she gave to future writers, and how much dread she actually was able to cultivate through this story. So the second book I read was Natural Beauty by Ling Huang, and that was a library audiobook. I gave it 4 stars. I finished it May 13th, and this was a one-day read for me. How far would you go for your parents, for someone you love? This basically is a descent into madness with a sense of dystopia. It focuses with a woman who need to help her parent due to their condition that they're in, and therefore she falls into madness. This very much felt like a Black Mirror episode and a dystopian film put together. It's such an ironic title though, Natural Beauty, while the novel shows the wildness of women at this boutique. Also, there is a twist in the story which leaves me wanting. Also, what I'll leave you with in this is beauty is never forever. And the last book, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and that was a library audiobook that I also ended up picking up, and I gave it 5 stars, and I finished it May 22nd. So this was my very first R.F. Kuang book, and this was an insanely well-written book with so much happening that this alone I feel could have been 3 books put in one. It has an incredibly strong female character, so many layers to her that you can't fully say if she's a good or a bad person, especially especially in the world she's born into, where nobody is per se a good or bad person. Actually, there are bad people, but they're not really good people. She works really hard, and she works on passing a difficult test to join an academy, and even with all the classes energy against her and the lack of privileges, she works so hard and she does so good to the point that it gets her to where she ends up being at the end of the book. And honestly, I love learning the world building and the lore of this book. That's why it's an incredible 5-star book, because the world building and lore behind it alone, so incredible that it could be a book on its own. After I had read this book, I could not wait to read the next book, because I was so sad for this book that I was so ready to start my journey down this trilogy. This was my reading wrap up for the months of April and May. Did we read any of the same books? Did you like any of the same books I liked? Did you hate some of the same books that I ended up not liking or ended up liking? If so, let me know down below, and let me know what you read these past couple months. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.